Dan Hurley strikes again. Braylon Mullins, come on down. You're a Husky. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying the content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow wherever you listen to the audio versions, Apple, Spotify, wherever. It helps the show grow, and we genuinely appreciate that support because every follow, subscription, and download not only helps build our UConn community, but also generates more revenue for UConn NIL initiatives with Bleeding Blue for Good as we give them 10% of our revenue. And there's also something I'm super excited about. We're continuing to donate 10% of all revenue to Husky Ticket Project. I'm a proud partner of theirs. We help send kids to games and make a real difference in underserved communities. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me and for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All right, let's bring in my Tuesday, Thursday co-host, Dan Meehan. I have you on mute for a second, but I have to start with welcome to Storrs, our newest commit, Braylon Mullins, 6'5", combo guard out of Greenfield, Indiana, snatched away from the Hoosiers last night, with Braylon Mullins joining Darius Adams and Eriche, Reibe, making this trio arguably the best recruiting class in the country. And from what I've heard, this was exactly the vision that Luke Murray and Dan Hurley started selling to all three of these players to come to UConn, and together they build the top class in the nation. Now with Mullins committing, that's exactly what they've done. Dan, Exit 68 founder and my co-host, there's not a question in any of that stuff. I'm just really excited about it and wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, what's this third big time recruit in the last 3 weeks? It puts UConn second in the 24/7 composite ratings for the 2025 class, just behind Duke. So everything that we had hoped would happen, stemming from winning back-to-back national titles, seems to be happening. This recruiting avalanche, if you will. And they might not be done. We'll see. Still on the trail for one or two big guys. But yeah, this is a fun one. I thought the announcement video and press conference that Braylon did was super cool with his family there. The announcement videos that these guys are doing now, getting involved
Amazing.
with, I want to say UConn's production staff was involved in doing a few of these for Darius Adams, Reibe, and now Braylon. You get Ray Allen doing the voiceover. Just what a cool nod. Yeah, I'm super excited about this one. The kid can do a little bit of everything. He's got size, plays above the rim. He can shoot. They've got some pieces.
What's interesting too about the intro video is it came from not Braylon's account. It came from Josh, his dad, and it hit a hashtag Jesus Shuttlesworth. So I'm telling you, like, what's so amazing about that video was that nod too, because if you remember anything about He Got Game, it was like, why'd you name me Jesus? And he was like, it wasn't religious. It was Earl the Pearl Monroe's Jesus of the Streets. Like that. One of the greatest
mashups in movie history, when you got all those legacy coaches from the 90s, Shaq, Dickie V, singing Jesus's praises on SportsCenter. It's such a good 2-minute clip from a movie, and that's an awesome way to bring in Ray.
And Jesus Shuttlesworth is easily the kind of quintessential basketball player in folklore, that doesn't exist, right? And I think that was so cool that Josh did that. So kudos to him. Really excited to have him in the fold as a Husky dad. And I'm sure there was tons of pressure felt by Braylon and his family from Indiana fans. I mean, he lives an hour away from Bloomington. So I give him a ton of credit. It's very brave of him and his family to kind of do this and supporting that decision to leave a place that, again, is only an hour from Bloomington, and really to come to a place of what Indiana used to be in the mid-'80s, which is the basketball capital of the world. So there's no question that I'm excited about this. But I think what's interesting is I think you're right. I don't think they're done. I think they are not only looking for potential other bigs, but I've talked about this theory in the past, which is we're already starting to hear Dan talk about how good Solo is, how much of a breakout season he's going to have. He's kind of talked about Jaden Ross as well, and that Jalen has to kind of match their intensity. So if he gets a breakout season from Liam, who obviously is a little bit banged up with a calf injury, gets one or two of those guys to have another monster year where they're getting projected as first round picks, they may go. So you can't just sit here and go, I'm going to go portaling, and because we know that Dan doesn't love to do that. So it may be one of these things where he's bringing in pieces that they can develop, and that's why you're seeing when people go, well, doesn't UConn have like all these guards now? Like, what are they going to do about playing time? It's like, well, guys are going to leave, and then you guys are going to come in and compete. And so, and guess what? Sometimes you have to wait your turn. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Braylon. I don't know if that's going to be the case with Darius. I do know that Eriche is likely going to get a lot of playing time his freshman year because they're losing a lot down low.
7-footer, tough to come by. So that would make sense.
But I do think that people need to understand that they're expanding rosters to 15. So they can always add people. I think right now they have 13 scholarship players on the roster right now. Or
if
walk on.
If Caravan leaves for the draft and one other guy, they'll have 2 scholarships for next year open.
But then really 3, because then you get an extra person. So
yes, correct.
So 3, and then what if we have Solo GoPro, Liam GoPro? There's 5. What if Jalen Storrs has a monster Big E season and all of a sudden he's a first round pick? There's 6. So again, there's a lot of what ifs, and that's part of the genius of this coaching staff, where it's like we're just going to stack talent that wants to be here, and we'll figure it out from there.
Yeah, to hit on a few of your points, I thought it was interesting. Braylon was fielding some questions, and he answered a few on the recruiting process with Dan. So first and foremost, I just want to give some condolences to our IU people, our friends in Indiana. This is the second one in a few weeks we've kind of swept underneath from you. So
the classy ones, not the ones who wish people on injuries.
Yes. So this is just a fun quote I thought that was telling from Braylon. I think he knows how to win. He knows how to coach you to win. Whenever I talked to Coach Hurley, he really wanted me. I felt wanted, and he said that he needed me. Their style of play fit me best. He showed me a lot of Cam Spencer highlights, off-ball, on-ball screen actions. He was just showing me a lot of what was capable, what I was doing in that offense. He brings a lot of defense to the table too. You get to play hard and you get to work hard, and I wanted to be coached by that. He definitely pitched me on that, and I liked the pitch. And also spoke to Hurley. It was from the outset, he realized how important it was to Braylon that he wanted to stay home in Indiana. And the hardest thing in the recruiting process for Hurley was not pitching him on what UConn could be. It was getting Braylon out of Indiana and pulling him away from home. So a nice nod from Braylon, and also Hurley understanding that it's important to these kids that it's not all about, coming to a big time offense and going to a number 1 school. He also realizes that it's important to want to stay home to your, a school that you've grown up with and grown accustomed to. Secondly, I thought with regard to some of the scholarship numbers, you've got 3 primetime recruits coming in now. Maybe another one opens up. The floodgates are kind of open now. And I think that if this keeps going on, if this keeps happening each season, you talk about Solo maybe having that sophomore breakout. Last year, no one thought Cam Spencer was going to the league. If there is a second, I think a lot of people maybe predict Liam's going to be one and done. We'll see. Alex, people would imagine, was going to the draft. So call it 2. Maybe there's a third guy in the team this year, similar to how last year we thought there might be 2, 3, and then Cam surprises everyone and becomes the 4th guy in the draft. Who knows how things open up? But another thing that I thought was interesting for Mullins is that during the recruiting process, Hurley mentioned nothing of one and done. There was no one and done talk.
Nope.
This is a top 20 recruit now. Who knows where he lands over the next year? 0 one and done talk. So another thing that Hurley alluded to, and Jay Wright actually commented on yesterday, it takes time once you get to campus. You only have got, I think, a certain amount of hours in the summertime, 38, 32, whatever, to practice with these guys. Their offense is the most intricate by far in America. It takes time to gel with the guys and just to learn the offense. It's like a QB learning the verbiage
Yeah,
when they get to the NFL in that regard. You might be one of the best players and one of the most skilled players in the country as a freshman. It doesn't matter, because if you don't learn this offense, you're not going to be featured in the right way to even get the looks at the next level. Hurley alluded yesterday that Liam's a little further along coming into school than Steph was last year, which is great. But again, if you don't know this playbook, it's going to be hard for you to kind of catch on. It took Steph half a season last year to even kind of get his groove. So we'll see.
for sure.
Mullins, big time recruit. He could be there a year or two. We don't know yet. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I think the pitch from what I heard from people was essentially like, you're going to just come to a place and be featured based off of what you put into it, right? That's the accountability piece that Dan Hurley loves, and we're going to talk about that more when we come back from the break, because Dan had some really interesting comments at Big East Media Day about why they should have been preseason number one, about why the Big East is the best conference in the country, and others kind of claim that when they haven't really won a damn thing. So we're going to talk about Dan and some of those quotes from yesterday coming up after this. What's up, NFL fans? I have an offer for you. If you are a new customer to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, you get $200 in bonus bets if you place your first $5 bet. That's on FanDuel. You can get the app. You can go on FanDuel.com. Get yourself all set up. Get yourself those $200 in bonus bets with that $5 initial bet, and you'll get that to get started. America's #1 sportsbook, it's FanDuel. Nope. And we're back on Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, with my co-host on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Dan Meehan of Exit 68. All right, Dan. So Dan Hurley is super intentional with some of the things he says. You alerted me to some of the comments he made around the Big East being the best conference in basketball. Talk about what he said, and we'll kind of discuss it and what that means in terms of his kind of protection of the Big East, but also the reality is he's right.
100%. Every time this guy speaks in public, your ear should perk up, because he speaks in very high specificity. And he gives some clues as to what might be on his mind. He talked a little bit yesterday at the Big East Media Day about UConn kind of getting buried in the tournament last year with the voting. He thought there was a clear, once the tournament started, the Huskies, who won 6 NCAA tournament games by an average of 23.5 points a game, he thought the conference should have had more teams in the tournament. They were obviously built for it. So just a couple quotes I thought might have been interesting. I don't know if we have a strong enough voice in that room. I don't know who's representing us in that room this year in the Big East. I'm just focused on winning our games at UConn so we can play our way in. I guess when there's a bunch of athletic directors or administrators or people from the big football conferences in that room, there's not a lot of people that are supporting what the best basketball conference in the country is. We are. The Big East is. I found that interesting. It's almost a call out of administration of the Big East. Like, this is what we do. It's always what we've done. This is a legacy conference. It's one of the oldest conferences in the country. They've always had high profile coaches. I think that's something that will carry forward. The Northeastern region is always going to be a great pipeline for basketball players. These guys can't play year round like the football conferences in the South or Southwest. It's always going to be a basketball conference. And I think from someone that's from the Northeast that grew up there, has made a living there, still does, stayed home, could have taken the Lakers job, stayed home in the Northeast, played in this conference, is proud to have been a Big East player. He just wants a little bit of support, I think, from the administration and the conference, just to, when it comes to tournament time, like, fight for us a little bit more. We're out here scheduling really tough out of conference schedules that probably hurt us in the metrics later on in the year, and then we're kicking each other's teeth in nightly once conference play gets underway. So I just thought those comments were interesting, and I just think that they might be looking for a little bit more support from the infrastructure and the powers that be within the conference.
Yeah, and I think the idea. Did you say the quote? I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought there. But did you talk about him saying that the claim that we're the best basketball conference in the country?
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, like, it's one of those things where he couldn't be more right. It's kind of like I always feel like when people talk about the Big 12 or the SEC or even the ACC, it's like in particular the Big 10. Like the Big 10 always gets that. Like I think it was Kevin Willard who said like we are by far the best conference in the country. It's like by what metric?
Haven't won a natty since 2000, and before that it was 1989. So
even Tom Izzo, who I'm not a huge fan of, was honest and was like, it certainly would beg the question that, why are we considered the best conference in the country if we can't close? They did a whole piece on it. I think it was Matt Norlander or something like that about how it's interesting. They've lost finals games, I think 9 times in their last 9 trips, but in that same time frame. So they actually have been to the Final Four. It's not like
they're there. They're always going to be there.
But anyway, like I think you're right. There's just not a lot of people supporting the Big East, but I also thought it was particularly interesting in a quick interview that turned into a podcast with Matt Norlander. It's called Eye on College Basketball. If you want to check it out, it's also on our social media. We clipped it for you on Locked On UConn on our Twitter page, where essentially Dan explains why he feels like he should have been preseason number 1, and I couldn't agree with him more. And he crystallized my thoughts. This is why Dan Hurley is a lot smarter than he gives himself credit for. He's definitely smarter than me, because I was like thinking about why they should be number 1, and I was thinking about football and in the every time a team wins a national championship, they typically get ranked number 1 because it's Georgia or Alabama or whoever. There's a lot of respect there, in particular with like guys like Saban and now Kirby Smart. And so with Dan, he actually took it another level, Jersey roots and all. And I should have known this, which is he brought up boxing, which I think is fantastic. He was like, it's kind of like a heavyweight champion that has the belt. He's like, even if he staggers, and he's like, you can't just take the belt away because they don't look the same. And he kind of crystallized the point by saying in 23, they had a team that won it all. And then last year they lost a bunch of people, and they had 2 totally different teams that went back to back. So for them to not look at that and go, oh, we got to rank UConn number 1. But they reverted back to, oh, there's no way they could do that again. That's his point. It's like, it's that heavyweight champion who may be, aging, but he's got one more. He's got a puncher's chance to knock you out, like Foreman did to Moore back in the day. And you just can't count. You just can't count the guys out. And I think that is something I've been talking about for months, that they provide such a wide gap in the coaching that if they even have mediocre players, they're going to make them to be elite. And now they have talent. Now they have the talent that they need to keep going. So again, I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure what you thought about it.
It's interesting, the mindset that some of the voters seem to be taking into account when they vote on these things. It's the last 2 years, and we noted it on last week's pod, UConn has the highest roster turnover in the history of their any national champion. The last 2 UConn championships, the most roster turnover for any champion in the history of college basketball. I know the UConn's, they're in top 5, so they're not getting totally besmirched here, but what roster is not dealing with turnover? Cooper Flagg is a freshman. Kansas is bringing in transfer portal guys. UConn, you want to give them a knock for big roster turnover. They've displayed the skill to deal with this roster turnover and turn it into gold better than any team in the country. So they should be getting even more credit for that, rather than getting hurt for it. So I love the comparison to the boxer and a champ getting staggered. They should get a little bit more respect in that regard, for what they've done in the last few years. I agree.
And before we get to Geno's comments, which I thought were really interesting, I thought Solo Ball got snubbed because, again, you can't look at just stats for this. These are projections. These aren't something in stone. We had Liam, freshman of the year. Aiden was a third team preseason honors. Alex was first team, and deservingly so. But I think some of the guys who are being overlooked, like Solo, even Jalen Stewart, are going to look at that and go, okay, what's the phrase the kids use? All right, bet. Like we'll do it. You know what I mean? I'm an old man, so when I say it sounds stupid, but I guarantee you that's part of it. But yeah,
you only have so many spots to fill these all-conference preseason teams, so you can't fill them with all UConn guys just because
I know that
team. I get it.
But there are 3 teams, Dan.
Sure.
It's not like it's just 6 like the preseason All-American.
Sure.
So you're telling me that there's only 2 guys.
We might be ready for the sophomore leap that solo ball is about to.
It's
it
coming.
could, bark on this season. Maybe it's a good thing for us that he got snubbed.
I think you're right.
Add a chip on your shoulder, and it gives you a little bit of motivation as a player to come in and try to bring something to the team that the rest of the world might not see coming. So I'm excited for the season to get going, and I think Solo's going to have a big time here.
No, I agree. And I'm teasing, but I still liked my title of my show yesterday, and I co-opted that from my buddy Chris Smith. They don't know ball or something like that. So they don't know ball, and like it's just funny. I think Solo's gonna have a monster year. All right. I know we're doing a men's podcast today, and but I missed this on the women's show that I recorded that's coming out at 3:00 because in my haste to get the show out. So I want to bring this up because this affects everyone in college athletics. Geno was asked about what would be his suggestion for NIL and how to fix it. And I thought his comments were pretty telling, which is I think how most coaches feel. And this is a quote from him. Do we keep the charade of student athlete or do we call it what it is? Semi-professional pay for play sports. And he also went on to say, and I'm paraphrasing, that if we do that, let's do it and not shy away from it and not be ashamed of it. Yeah, but not be ashamed of it. Because I think that's the biggest thing that they really do, which is, people are ashamed to say that these athletes get paid. It's kind of like, don't tell anybody, that such and such makes $600,000 this year. Nobody cares. It's already the cat's already out of the bag. The genie's out of the bottle. I really feel like he's onto something here. That if that's the case, and some of his comments were, make the kids sign a contract so they can't just transfer like that. And there's a buyout where essentially if you want to leave, then your buyout says X and that's it. And then let's make a business out of it and let's have a salary cap. My question to you is, do you agree with that? Or do you feel like there could be kind of a Pandora's box there? Because as I've had this conversation a little bit on Twitter a little bit today, there's many different versions of salary cap. Like there's a hard cap, there's luxury tax, there's
second and third aprons now.
Yes. So like, what do you do with a kid if or a gal if they're not performing? Do you release them because your salary cap is too high? Like there's a whole weird kind of myriad of things that we can talk about with that. But just on that aspect of make it a professional, semi-professional pipeline to the pros, what are your thoughts?
Let's not beat around the bush here. It is full-on free agency in college basketball and college football, all these sports. Basketball and football bring in the most money. That's how it's going to be going forward. These guys are going to get paid. A lot of them, we've learned over time, have full teams already. Marketing guys, NIL agents working for them, out there hunting deals on the side, in addition to getting NIL money up front to come to a school. I think there's a lot of people that think they know what the NIL era is, but they really don't. I don't know so much about it. And I think if maybe some more of that, how the payments are made to players. Does anybody know how that's done? Do you get a bag up front of cash? Do you get padded out payments throughout your college days? Are those structured through a contract? Who knows? But I think if some of that information maybe was made public, just not the actual specifics of dollar amounts and stuff like that. We don't need to know all the details, but maybe if there were a few more details made public to the folks at home, it might just give a better understanding of the landscape and give maybe some of these guys. I do think there's been a few cop-outs coaching wise, and just that sound whiny in some regards. With the current landscape, everyone's dealing with it. Everyone's going to have to deal with it. I do agree that the Sabans of the world that have been doing it one way for 30 years, the changes overnight are overwhelming. That's a lot, especially when you're on the back end of your career and you don't have many years left in your coaching career to begin with. But I think that coaches that are coming into, Shire spoke on it a few days ago. He thinks he's at an advantage because this is all he's ever known as a coach.
I saw that.
I couldn't agree more. I think Hurley, he knows the old way, he knows the new way. I think he's in the middle of his coaching prime now, so he's okay kind of dealing with the punches and the changes within the landscape there. But Yeah, I don't know. Maybe some more just kind of insight and transparency on how some of these NIL deals and just the overall landscape is structured might help the people at home understand just how hard it is, but also just kind of bring a little bit more clarity to the situation at whole, and just tell it for what it is. It's full on free agency.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with anything you said. I think the interesting thing for me is going to be about, like, I think UConn's at an advantage right now because they've figured it out, and they figured out how to
They
get kids
embraced
to
it
their
early.
school. Yes,
They embraced it early, and it's
but they
working for them.
but then they've also created a culture that, and this is what I was going with, is that they've created this culture where they're honest with their players from the start. They're honest with their recruits. I don't know every little detail, so don't take this as gospel. But what we do know is that they essentially don't talk about NIL until they get a full commitment from the player and the family that this is what they want to do, and then they start talking about that. So if all teams, even when they have robust NILs like the BYUs of the world and everyone, if they basically told players, we're not talking about NIL, you're going to get your money. Relax. Like, we got this. You're going to be fine. If you're going to talk more about basketball and what the fit is, and almost like true traditional recruiting from back in the day, that is exactly what Dan Hurley and his staff has done. And they do a masterful job of evaluating players that make sense for them. So that's the advantage that they have. They don't have the most NIL. And that's what pisses me off when people say, well, it's really just about who has the most money. If that was the case, then BYU, Kentucky, and Arkansas would win national championships every year, but they don't.
Yep.
Nick Saban said it on College Game Day. You could have a $20 million roster, and if those guys don't do what you're saying, you're S out of luck. So guess what? That's exactly what I don't agree with Nick all the time, but he was spot on there. We're going to move on, though, because I really want to get to the article that you sent me about Storrs and the culture of Storrs and how uniquely unremarkable it is. I thought that was a really cool quote from the writer Michael Rosenberg of Sports Illustrated. Some people may take offense to that, but I thought it was like a badge of honor. So we're going to do one more break and come back and talk about that article that was in Sports Illustrated coming up after the break. What's up, everybody? Do you know about Prize Picks? I'm trying to find the promo here. If you're looking for the best place to get real money sports action, let me tell you a little bit about Prize Picks. I have it on my app, my phone right now. With over 10 million members, I'm one of them. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Here's how it works. You pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than the projected stats, you win up to 100 times your money. It's simple, fast, and fun. This week, I'm loving the football picks on the board. Justin Jefferson for more than 83.5 receiving yards, and Patrick Mahomes for less than 267.5 passing yards. Whether you're a seasoned player or just getting started, Prize Picks has something for everyone. And the best part, you can get in on the action in 30-plus states, including California, Texas, and Florida. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you make your first $5 deposit. Terms and conditions apply. And remember, Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's bring on Dan Meehan again. We are in the midst of a pretty fun episode talking about Braylon Mullins, talking about the recruiting class that we have, Big East Media Day, and some of the quotes from Dan Hurley and Geno Auriemma. But I thought this article that you sent me yesterday was really cool. Really appreciate you doing that, because I watched it. I read it, and it's about Storrs as a whole and the culture that's been created at this place. And it didn't start with Dan Hurley, right? You know, we have to go back to 40 years ago with Geno Auriemma and Jim Calhoun, building this dynasty in this, not so-called, the basketball capital of the world. And Storrs isn't a place you pass through. It's kind of a destination. So I thought that was a really cool quote from that article. What was your initial thoughts? And then I'll give you my thoughts that I thought were pretty unique story about Storrs in general. Oh, hold on, you're paused. Let me get you. I want to get your full thoughts on this, and you're muted. So let's get you on now. You are not muted.
I thought the write-up was a really nice nod. A special place in the world, very rare, very unique. this is, like you said, it's a destination. It's tough to get out there. It's in the middle of nowhere. You're weaving through, to get to the night games in the middle of December. You're driving through a lot of back roads with no streetlights. There is now, but there didn't used to be a big city kind of built around the campus. There wasn't a lot of infrastructure there. It was just the campus and the arena and the field house. And Ray Allen has kind of probably to credit for some of these write-ups getting done now. That was the draw for him when he was getting recruited by Coach Pitino at Kentucky, and when he ultimately came to UConn, he didn't want the nightclubs. He didn't want the extracurricular stuff. He just wanted to play basketball, lock himself in the gym, stick a broomstick through the door, and just hole up and learn the game. And that's what he did there. And it's a really special place in the world. I think they've obviously grown it into something different now, but it's still in the middle of nowhere. It's still a destination to get to. I'm glad that they've got some of the more high-profile games on campus this year, because I think the atmosphere there that they've built at Gamble, they just poured a couple millions into renovating the Gamble with the new video board and some of the changes that they made inside the arena. But yeah, a cool write-up. This is a school that within the last 5-6 years really drove a stake into the ground by literally trademarking the phrase basketball capital of the world, which I thought was ballsy, but it has worked. They are literally taking trademarks out to kind of brand the school, and they've done that. All the recruiting that they do now, the social media, they have weaponized it. All these recruiting videos that they're producing for players, kids like that stuff, man. It's working. Hurley is willing and able to sit down for these interviews and go in front of the camera to be forward facing and use the ammunition that they have, which is championships. It's trophies in a glass display case for days, and they use that as a recruiting pitch to student athletes, and it's working. So yeah, I thought it was a super cool write-up.
Yeah, some of the highlighted quotes here are no one picks UConn for the wrong reasons. That was Dan Hurley's quote that I thought was fantastic, because he's right. I mean, no one gets tricked. Like, you're not like, hey man, come to Storrs, this great beachfront property, and you get there and you're like, what? Mm-hmm. So that's one. And the other one too is, and this is, I kind of disagree with Geno on this, and it's a very small disagreement. This is his quote. It's different here. Not better, not magical, just different. And I would disagree. I think the fact that it is different, that it is a smaller environment, that, like we talked about, where there's no frills, there's just about getting yourself in the gym, as Ray Allen. And I think Rebecca Lobo said this too in an interview a long time ago, that was one of the things as the number one recruit in the country in 1991 that drew her to UConn, was like, oh, okay, so I'm going to go focus solely on basketball. And that was something different than some of the other folks that were pitching her back in the day. So to have that kind of seminal place is, to me, magical. Like, it's all of that small, all the little small things that add up to something big. And I think that kind of encapsulates what makes UConn so unique, is the culture of that hard work, the discipline, the focus, without distraction. And Dan said a long time ago, and probably continues to do it, they want serious people. Like, they don't want people out, they don't want knuckleheads to come around and screw anything up. They hold that sacred. And I know Geno feels the same way. So super cool write-up. If you haven't checked it out, I messaged Michael Rosenberg. I'd love to have him on to talk about it and his experience kind of interviewing Geno and Dan for this, and get him on and talk about it. But you got any parting thoughts before we hit the road on a pretty cool episode today?
How many days do we have until the season? 10, 11?
It is literally 2 weeks from today.
I wish I could go to sleep, wake up tomorrow, and have the first game just ready to go. Yeah, I'm incredibly excited for the season. Third big time recruit in the last 3 weeks. Has me excited for next season. I am all here for the 4-peat. Let's go.
Absolutely, man. It's 13 days. The women are 14. So they're on the men are on the 6th, the women are on the 7th. So the
women, I know, have some really cool stuff planned for Geno and Chris Daly for their 40th year on campus. I think there's going to be some really special alumni players coming back for some of those games. So I'm excited for that.
Awesome. Good tease. All right. Well, listen, This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. For Dan Meehan, we're asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, make sure those toughness meters always rise. And as always, go Huskies.